David Morrison had lived 53 years, and if there was one thing he learned, it was that life rarely turned out the way you planned. Standing in the men's clothing section of Riverside Mall that Saturday afternoon, he watched his 14-year-old daughter Emma pick through the clearance rack with careful fingers. Her wheelchair navigated the narrow aisles with practiced ease, though he noticed how some shoppers gave them wide berth, as if disability were somehow contagious. "Dad, look at this one," Emma held up a navy sweater. "It's your color." David smiled, the kind of smile that had worn grooves around his eyes over the years. "You think so, sweetheart?" "I know so. Mom always said blue brought out your eyes." The mention of Sarah still brought that familiar ache. 3 years gone now. Cancer had taken her too young, too fast. But Emma was their miracle. Born with spina bifida, she'd spent her childhood in and out of hospitals. The medical bills had been crushing. David had worked 2 jobs for years, warehouse work during the day and security at night, until his back finally gave him a firm talking to. Now he drove for a delivery service, just enough to make ends meet. Across the store, near the women's section, a young woman in her early 20s sat motionless in her wheelchair. Her name was Rachel, though David didn't know that yet. She had auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a beige top that had seen better days. Her hands rested in her lap, trembling slightly from the cerebral palsy that had shaped her life. Next to her stood a young man in his late 20s, wearing a bright red polo shirt under a worn leather jacket. This was Marcus, Rachel's older brother, and the tension in his shoulders suggested this shopping trip wasn't going well. "We can't afford anything here," Rachel said quietly, her words coming slow and careful. "Let's just go." Marcus squeezed her shoulder gently. "We're here. Let's at least look. You deserve something nice." What neither of them noticed was Gregory Hartwell, the store manager, watching them from behind a display of dress shirts. Gregory was in his late 40s, bald, with a neatly trimmed beard and a brown vest that marked him as management. He'd been in retail for 23 years, and he'd seen every trick in the book. Or so he thought. David had just paid for his navy sweater when he heard the commotion. Gregory's voice carried across the store, sharp and accusing. "Miss, I need you to open your bag." Rachel looked up, confused, her canvas bag sitting in her lap. I don't understand." "Your bag. Open it, now." Gregory's tone left no room for discussion. Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tight. "What's this about?" "I saw her slip something in there. Security footage doesn't lie." Gregory crossed his arms, looking down at Rachel with cold certainty. A crowd was forming. David found himself moving closer, Emma wheeling beside him. Something about the scene felt wrong. He'd seen enough unfairness in his life to recognize it. Rachel's hands shook as she tried to open the zipper, her fingers not cooperating. Tears welled in her eyes. "I wouldn't." "Let me help," Marcus said, but Gregory held up a hand. "Number." "She needs to do it herself." "I want to see what's in there." "That's enough." David's voice wasn't loud, but it carried authority. Years of being a father had taught him when to step in. He walked through the crowd, his delivery uniform still on from his morning shift. "You're humiliating this young woman." Gregory turned, annoyed. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when I see someone being treated without dignity." David looked at Rachel, whose cheeks were wet with tears. He recognized that look, the same one Emma got when kids at school whispered. "What did you supposedly see her take?" "A scarf. Red silk. $300. David gestured to Rachel's bag, which was finally open. Inside were tissues, a worn wallet, a pill bottle, and a small notebook. "No scarf." "I don't see anything." Gregory's confidence wavered. "It must be somewhere else." "Where else would it be?" Marcus's voice rose. "You want to search my sister? Pat her down in front of everyone. She has cerebral palsy. She can barely open a zipper. And you think she's shoplifting?" Emma wheeled closer to Rachel. "It's okay," she said softly. "He's wrong. My dad will help." David turned to Gregory. "I think you owe these folks an apology." "I was doing my job. Your job is to treat customers with respect." David's voice was gentle but firm. "I've been watching you. You've been following them since they came in. You assume the worst because of that wheelchair." "I know that look. I've seen it directed at my daughter 100 times." The crowd murmured. Several people nodded. An elderly woman spoke up. I saw the whole thing. She never touched any scarves." Gregory's face reddened. I must have been mistaken." "You were more than mistaken," Marcus said, his arm around Rachel's shoulders. "You were prejudiced." "I apologize," Gregory said stiffly, then walked away. The crowd dispersed slowly. David knelt beside Rachel's wheelchair, bringing himself to her eye level. "You okay, honey?" Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you." "Most people just walk away." "Well, I'm not most people." "I'm David. This is my daughter Emma." "I'm Rachel. This is Marcus, my brother." Marcus extended his hand, his grip firm. "What you did, that took guts." "Most people don't want to get involved." David shrugged. "I've been on the receiving end of assumptions. When Emma was younger, people assumed she couldn't understand them, couldn't think for herself. They'd talk about her like she wasn't there. It taught me something important. Everyone deserves to be seen." Emma and Rachel were already talking, finding common ground in shared experiences. David watched them, feeling that familiar mixture of pride and protectiveness. "Can I buy you coffee?" Marcus asked. "It's the least I can do." "You don't owe me anything." "I know, but I'd like to." "Please." 20 minutes later, they sat in the mall's cafe till the copyright. Marcus stirred his coffee slowly, gathering his thoughts. "Our father. He left when Rachel was born. Couldn't handle having a disabled child. Our mom raised us alone, worked herself to exhaustion. She passed last year." "I'm sorry," David said, meaning it. "Rachel's been living with me, but it's tight. I work in IT, freelance stuff, but medical bills eat everything. Her medications alone." Marcus trailed off. David understood. "When Emma was little, I had bill collectors calling at all hours. My wife and I nearly lost our house twice." "People don't understand the cost of disability unless they've lived it." "Exactly." Marcus looked at his sister, who was showing Emma something on her phone. "She wants to go to college, wants to study literature. But between her care needs and the cost, she should go," David said firmly. "Emma wants to be a teacher. We'll figure it out somehow." "We always do." They exchanged phone numbers before parting, a friendship begun in crisis. David thought that was the end of Ida, a good deed done, new friends made. Life would continue in its modest, struggling way. But 3 days later, his phone rang with an unknown number. "Mr. Morrison?" "This is James Patterson, attorney at Patterson and Associates. I represent Thomas Winchester. He'd like to meet with you." "I think you have the wrong number. You intervened on behalf of Rachel Winchester last Saturday, at Riverside Mall." David's mind raced. "Winchester?" Marcus never mentioned it. "Thomas Winchester is Rachel's father. He'd very much like to speak with you. Would tomorrow work?" The restaurant was far fancier than anywhere David had eaten in years. Thomas Winchester was in his late 60s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than David's car. But his eyes were tired, haunted. "Thank you for coming," Thomas said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've watched the security footage a dozen times." "What you did for my daughter." "Your daughter?" David said carefully. "Marcus said your father left when she was born." Thomas's face crumpled. "I did. God help me, I did. I was 37, building my company, and when Rachel was born with disabilities, I ran. I sent money, but I wasn't there. I wasn't a father." He pulled out his phone, showed David a photo. "This is from 2 weeks ago. First time I'd seen her in 23 years. Marcus tracked me down." He was angry, rightfully so. "But he let me meet her, and she forgave me." "Can you imagine? After everything, she forgave me." David thought of Emma, of all the times he'd been tired, frustrated, overwhelmed. Being a parent isn't easy. "That's no excuse. I chose business over my child. I became successful, built an empire, but I lost my family. My wife died never forgiving me. And now Rachel. She's struggling, and it's my fault. So help her now." David said simply. "It's not too late. I'm trying." "But Marcus doesn't trust me. He thinks I'll disappear again." "And Rachel? She's kind, but there's distance." "I don't blame her." Thomas looked directly at David. "But when I saw what you did, how you stood up for her, a complete stranger, You showed her more fatherhood in 5 minutes than I did in 23 years. David shifted uncomfortably. I just did what was right. Exactly. Which is why I want to help you. Marcus told me about Emma, about your situation. I know you've struggled with medical bills. We manage you. Please, let me do this, not as payment, as gratitude, and maybe as penance. Thomas slid an envelope across the table. Emma's medical expenses, covered, and a college fund, for both girls, if they want it. Rachel and Emma. David stared at the envelope. I can't accept this. Why not? Because I didn't help Rachel for a reward. I know that. Which is exactly why you should accept it. You helped my daughter because you're a good man. Let me help yours because I'm trying to become one. David thought of Emma, of all the times he'd worried about her future, of the nights he'd lain awake wondering how they'd manage. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let an old man try to make amends. Say you'll let our girls be friends. Say you'll help me learn how to be the father Rachel deserves. And so they did. In the months that followed, David and Thomas met regularly. David taught him the small things: patience, presence, showing up, how to listen when Rachel spoke slowly, choosing her words, how to see past the wheelchair to the brilliant young woman within. Emma and Rachel became inseparable, two girls who understood each other in ways others couldn't. They studied together, dreamed together, supported each other. Marcus, wary at first, slowly softened as his father proved consistent. Showed up. Stayed. One evening, nearly a year later, David sat on his porch watching Emma and Rachel in the yard, their wheelchairs side by side as they watched the sunset. Thomas sat beside him, looking more at peace than David had ever seen him. You changed my life, Thomas said quietly. No, David replied. I just reminded you it wasn't too late to change it yourself. I've been thinking. My company needs good people. People with integrity. Would you consider coming to work for me? Not charity. A real job. Benefits. Stability. David considered. What would I do? I'm not a businessman. You'd train our managers. Teach them what you taught me. How to see people. All people. How to lead with compassion. We're opening accessibility consulting, helping businesses do better. You'd be perfect. It was Emma who decided it. Dad, you're always helping people. Maybe it's time to help yourself too. And so David's life changed, though he remained the same man at heart. The man who saw a young woman being humiliated and simply refused to walk away. The man who understood that kindness costs nothing but means everything. Years later, at Emma and Rachel's joint college graduation party, David stood watching the celebration. Both young women had earned their degrees. Emma would teach, Rachel would write. Both would change the world in their own ways. Thomas approached, older now but lighter somehow. Thank you, he said, not for the first time. For what? For showing me that being a father isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, being present, choosing love over fear, every single day. David smiled. You figured that out yourself. You just needed a reminder. We all do sometimes. Thomas watched his daughter, laughing with Emma. That day in the mall, you could have walked away. Most people did. I couldn't. Because every time someone walked away from Emma, every time someone made assumptions, judged her, dismissed her up, it hurt. I couldn't do that to someone else's child. That's what makes you extraordinary. No, David said, that just makes me human, the way we're all supposed to be. The evening grew late. Families gathered, friends celebrated, and two young women who'd found friendship in the unlikeliest of places prepared to step into futures bright with possibility. And David Morrison, single father, delivery driver, accidental catalyst for change, simply felt grateful. For Emma, for the courage to stand up, for the reminder that one moment of kindness can ripple outward in ways we never imagine. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. See each other, stand up for each other, choose compassion over convenience. The rest takes care of itself.